All right, Mr. Sapora here, and this week we're talking about the class Chondrichthyes, and this is also known as the cartilaginous fish, or otherwise known as the sharks. All right, so let's get to it. When we're talking about these different groups, we've talked about in the species list, the different phylums and things like that. We're talking a lot about the animal kingdom, and we're focusing on that here when we're talking about marine life and marine biology. We started out with the algae, and we have done phytoplankton, which is all of it the start of the food web. But a lot of the complexity and diversity in the ocean, of course, comes out of the animal kingdom. And almost all of the different groups of actually, except for one, of the different groups of animals arose in the ocean, evolved in the ocean, and most of the different varieties of and species are actually in the ocean when compared to land. So we have these different phylums that we've been focusing on, and in lecture now we're talking about the different groups of vertebrates. For our species list, we're really focused on the other 96% of all animals, right? Vertebrates are only 4%. So those are the porifera, the sponges, the cnidarians, 3 different groups of worms, the mollusks, arthropods as well. We're going to get to those, and those are on land insects, but in water they're crustaceans. So all of your different crabs and things like that, but your zooplankton, your shrimp, your copepods, isopods, and things like that are your primary consumers in the start of really that next step in the ocean food web. And then of course the echinoderms as well. So we're focusing on vertebrates here because they're big and interesting, and they make up the ocean's nectar, right? Things that actually are big and swim around, and that's because vertebrates are big. Vertebrates have that vertebral column, and then because of that, they have bigger bodies where muscles attach in different segmented blocks. They have bigger bodies because they have a closed circulatory system consisting of a heart, veins, and arteries. They respire through lungs or gills. They have different sensory organs as well, and all that. So this allows vertebrates to be bigger in size and start to move against the water current. The rest of the animal stuff is either plankton, or most of it is actually benthic, belonging to the bottom of the ocean. The majority of all the other animal groups are in some way associated with the bottom of the ocean. They're benthic organisms. Now, out of the vertebrate phylum, there are 7 different classes, and we are familiar with 4 of them, right? We're familiar with the 4 that are on land. We're familiar with mammals, birds, reptiles, and amphibians. The other 3 are in the ocean or in water, and so we're not as familiar with those. Those are the bony fish, Osteichthyes, which we'll talk about next week. What we're talking about this week, Chondrichthyes, the sharks and rays, cartilaginous fish. And then we already spoke about the agnathans, the jawless fish, the lampreys, and the hagfish. Those are the 3 groups that are in the water and dominate the oceans, and they're the oldest ones also. They're the earliest to evolve, and then the other groups have arisen from those. So let's talk about Chondrichthyes. Let's do it. Okay, Chondrichthyes, again, cartilaginous fish. Ichthyes means fish, and ichthyologist studies fish. And chon refers to cartilage, so cartilaginous fish, Chondrichthyes. Consists of sharks, rays, as in stingrays or skates, and the chimeras, which are these fish up in here. And we have those here off the Oregon coast as well, and they have them at the Oregon Coast Aquarium. They're small. Okay. Characteristics that all members of this class, Chondrichthyes, have in common. Well, first off, they're the first group of vertebrates to have paired fins and biting jaws with teeth in them. The agnathans didn't have that. If you remember, agnathans just have one long kind of tube, and they swim almost like a snake, right, side to side, but they have that tail fin that goes around. But they didn't have the paired fins, and they didn't have jaws. So these guys have jaws with teeth. Booyah! Okay, let's keep going. The mouths of Chondrichthyes are located ventrally, and by ventrally I mean on the bottom down here for feeding. So I'm going to try and draw one here. Let's see how that goes. Pretty good, pretty good. There we go. And there we go. Ooh, put the fins on them. Okay, so here's my drawing of a shark, and where the mouth is located on a shark or a ray or a chimera, you'll notice almost all of them, is down here. Right, back in here, it's mirrored on the bottom in red. So it is there because they are feeding on the bottom. They're benthic feeders. That's where the majority of things are in the ocean. So these guys evolved to be swimming around, cruising across the ocean floor, and snacking on all the things that are down there on or even in the mud. draw a little picture here. There's the shark, and there's its snack. So it's swimming along, and then it's grabbing things off the bottom, and then really crushing them. A lot of rays and sharks, they don't have really, most of them don't have really huge, gnarly teeth like you see here. They have a bunch of little small teeth, or they have kind of like this plate where they can just crush things. Rays have that, where they can crush mollusks and things. So they're swimming along, feeding on the bottom, because that's where most of the food is, and that's where their mouths are located. They have visible gill slits. So with the agnathans, they had holes, and with bony fish, osteichthyes, they have a gill plate that covers up their gills, right? If you think about fish that you've caught, probably like that. But sharks and rays have visible gill slits, like you see there in purple, where water moves through, where they get oxygen from. Now, because they're a bottom feeder, they have a thing called a spiracle, which I'll color in pink here, up above their eye. So here's your shark. Here's their eye right up here that they're looking around with. But they have this spiracle above the eye, right up here in pink, right up there. And in this spiracle is used as a water intake system. And so water goes in to the spiracle and then out through the gills. So in to the spiracle, out through the gills. And this allows them to breathe in fresh, or not fresh water, but at least non-muddy water while they're feeding along the bottom. If they were to suck water in through their mouth and have it go through their gills, they would end up sucking up a lot of mud and debris and run that through their gills and clog them up. So they have this hole at the top when you can kind of see them opening and closing it, especially on rays. In fact, here on this ray, you can see it. There's the eye. There's the spiracle. When you're in the water with them especially, you'll see them sitting really still, but you'll see this hole on the top of their head kind of opening and closing. And, yeah, that's where they suck water in, so it's nice and fresh. So visible gill slits and then spiracles up behind the eye. Okay. Let's keep going. Okay, so yeah, they're cartilaginous fish, and guess what? They have a skeleton made of cartilage. Not shocking there. And cartilage is different from bone. Cartilage is a protein. And so it is, protein, like similar to your fingernails or your hair. It's what is in your ear that makes it kind of waxy. It's what's in your nose. And it can be pretty hard, obviously, but it is not true bone. So it doesn't fossilize as well, but it is more flexible. But it's also just not as strong, and it's heavy. Cartilage is also heavy compared to bone, which is why bony fish can be so much smaller. There are 900 species in this group, in the class Chondrichthyes, including the rays and sharks all together, worldwide, 900 that have been named so far. Of course, there have been many, many more throughout the fossil history, right, and in the fossil record, because they go back so far in time. And there's many different shapes of these things. Again, most of them are bottom feeders. So this one's interesting. This is a sawtooth shark, and this is a long snout, basically, projection. It kind of pokes out, and these are little bits of cartilage that stick up off of it. And instead of really being primarily used as a weapon, this is primarily used to dig in the sediment like a rake. And they rake around for clams and mollusks and invertebrates and everything else. And then when they find them, they flip them up, and then they swim over and grab them with their mouth, which is still located down back in here underneath in the bottom. Here's the eyes, and here are the spiracles, again, where they suck water in, and then it comes out through their gills and away. Pretty cool. Okay, more facts. Okay, let's get into it then. So underneath the class, so we got the animal kingdom, phylum vertebrate. Now we're talking about the different phylums. We're talking about Chondrichthyes here, sharks, rays, and all these. Now we've got orders, and we've got two primary orders of Chondrichthyes beneath that we're going to look at. One is the Batoidae, rays and skates. Think of them as water bats, right? So that's what they're named after. So rays and skates. Stingrays, manta rays, and then we have actually skates here. Features of them, of course, they have huge pectoral fins, right? They're flattened down. A lot of them don't have that upper dorsal fin. They just have these elongated pectoral fins. They are flattened down over time evolutionarily, so they develop out sideways, not vertically. And those are big pectoral fins, which they use to move and also to stir up sediment and hunt with. Almost all are benthic bottom dwellers, really with the exception of like manta rays, which are big and swim through and eat plankton. They feed on primarily crustaceans, mollusks, and worms. So things that are down in the mud, right? There's a lot of living things. There's more, again, at the bottom and even in the bottom than there is out in the water or on the surface. So that's what they specialize in. And stingrays have these special spines on their tail that hurt. I put that there because that's kind of a no-duh. Yes, they hurt. And the deal with the stingray's spines, it's kind of interesting to think about it, is if this is their tail, right, their body's over here, so this is the body, and then this is the tail here, it's going to go up. The spines lay down like this on the tail, so that when the tail comes up, the spine pops out, and then that gets like a hypodermic needle slammed into whatever. So it sits down normally. They're almost facing kind of forward. And then as it lifts it up, it flies out and then will stab you in the leg very painfully, or in the foot or something. So it'll come over and kind of whip down on you and embed in you. Can be very, very painful. And if you're hit in the wrong place or it's an exceptionally large one, you could die as well. Although almost all of them are just result in a lot of pain and yelling. I've seen someone get hit one time. It's not fun to watch. Okay. And skates are large, actually. They're larger than rays, and they exist in more temperate waters, and that's what we have here. Okay, so we have the largest skate, actually, the Raja binoculata, named after these two spots on its side, and it's called the big skate, and it's out in our waters. Tends to be down there, usually below where you'd find one diving, so below 100 feet. They're just out there off the continental shelf, kind of scooting around, feeding, and they camouflage really well. They'll dig into the mud and kind of hang there. But yeah, we have them here, and occasionally they get brought up when you're out, like bottom fishing out in the deeper ocean. And no spines on skates. No spines. Let's talk about sharks, shall we? Class Chondrichthyes, again, sharks, rays, and skates, but now we're talking about the shark order, Salaci. So this is the order below the class that consists of sharks. Okay, these are old. These date back 420 million years ago. So way before dinosaurs, almost 260 million years before, 240 million years before dinosaurs. These guys had the run of things, so quite a long time. They are living fossils. And there are over 500 species. The smallest is the dwarf lantern shark, which I have a picture of here. This is a full-grown shark, right? And one of our bias is that when we think of shark, we think of, someone swimming away terrified and screaming, some giant thing with teeth out in the front. It's going to come and bite your leg off. There's only a few species that will actually do that, and the vast majority of the 500 species, let's say at least 450, probably more like 480 species of sharks, are basically harmless to people, right? They're as small as a lanternfish, but they do get as big as the whale shark, which is the largest fish in the world, and they can get up to 46 feet long, whale sharks can. I've been lucky enough to see two while I was diving, and one was as clear as this, and just like this when I was scuba diving. It swam right by me, actually. I got to watch it pass over, and I was able to sit right underneath it. It's a pretty great day. Cool things about sharks, their skin is covered in this really rough, it feels rough on the surface, and then when you look at it with a microscope, they are actually little tiny, almost tooth-shaped bits of teeth-like material. They're called dermal denticles. And so here is an image under a microscope of what that is. They're actually little hardened, tooth-like plates that are basically embedded in their skin. It's almost like armor for them. It protects them from injury. It protects them from parasites. And other animals will actually use it to kind of swim and peel their scales off and things like that. Pretty cool stuff. So those are their dermal denticles, or denticles. Their teeth are not embedded in their jaws like ours are, down in sockets, basically. They're not rooted. They come and they grow out, and then they're kind of loosely embedded in the gums, and they often replace them throughout their lives, so their teeth are kind of constantly growing forwards, the oldest ones at the front and the newest ones at the back. And many are apex predators, or the top of the food chain in the ocean. They get huge, they get big, like the great white shark, the tiger, the blue, the mako, the hammerhead. These are all ones that, could be a problem, bull sharks as well, for people. But again, the vast majority of the 500 species, there's only a handful that are pretty vicious. I have links here where it's in blue, so feel free to click on these and have a look at some of these as well. And one of the things about sharks, why they're big as well, is they lack a gas-filled swim bladder, which the next group we talk about, the bony fish, evolve and have. And so for buoyancy, they don't have a little air pocket inside of them. For buoyancy, they rely on really large livers and super enlarged livers that run down both sides of their body. So they kind of run down from their mid-torso all the way down, and they're super oily and greasy. And oil is lighter than water. So this causes them to be a little bit buoyant, right? They are not super buoyant. In fact, a lot of sharks, if they stop swimming, will kind of sink. So many sharks park themselves near the bottom or on the bottom when they rest as well, or they kind of continually kind of swim or sit there where there's an ocean current as well. So they have a lot of liver oil, and shark liver oil is something that is sold on the market. It's billed as having a lot of healing properties. There is no scientific evidence to suggest that it is in any way what it is advertised as delivering. And the fact that sharks are targeted for just their livers, and these are apex predators, there's not a lot of them. If you remember from ecology, talking about energy pyramids, right? So the farther up you go in the pyramid, the less energy there is in the ecosystem for you, so your numbers are less, right? The 10% rule as you move up. So there are already fewer sharks in the ocean than there are anything else. And then when we target them, a lot of times we can really damage the shark population for a long time. We're going to look at that in just a second as well. So I would stay away from anything shark product related, including shark teeth necklaces and things like that. My general rule is if it's an animal product and it's some kind of jewelry or it's some kind of souvenir, I don't buy it. I don't buy feathers. I just don't buy anything. Even if they say they're from chickens, just as a rule, I don't. And we've been in other countries where some artwork is made out of stuff. I just avoid it. It's easy that way. Okay, enough of that. Let's get back on to sharks. Order, Salachi. Here we go. Okay, cool features about sharks, things that we've heard about. They have a lateral line. Here's this red line that runs down their side and even up their tail. Fish have a lateral line as well, because fish evolved from sharks. And this lateral line has little pits, and down in there, as water moves into them, they have little nerve bundles that are connected to their brain, and they can sense things in the water. They can detect sound. They can detect electrical fields. And in their nose, they have this pitted nares, and they have a whole ton of these clustered in their face, all of these little pits with these little neuromasts, kind of like neuroreceptors, and they can pick up smells as well. So all of these little tiny holes act, and down below, see these in clusters? And look how they're shaped right here, how they fan out. This will give you directionality. This will allow you to triangulate something. If a scent is, or a field, or whatever it is you're picking up is just a little bit stronger on this side, but you're still getting it here, right? It's right in here. If it's only on this side, it's more over here. So that allows them to steer in the water and find things, including like blood, so an injured animal. Again, they can sense electrical fields, so they can sense a school of smaller fish up in the distance, even if the water is cloudy and muddy, which it often is, especially near shore. And so it allows them to hunt, basically, without using their eyes and their other senses as well. Of course, they have big eyes. They can see in the dark, or, basically. Okay, nerves in the snout that can detect electrical fields. I just talked about that. Oh, and some do have to constantly move due to that lack of buoyancy in the last slide. That's come up as questions, and so I added that there. Yeah, some have to move, or when I've seen sharks in some areas where I've been diving, they will cluster when they're sleeping in an area where the water kind of gets funneled through an area where there's a current. They'll sit between rocks down low, and they'll kind of all hang in there in a line and just kind of chill. And then as the water moves, they just kind of go side to side, and the water will pass through their spiracle and their gills while they're sleeping. Okay, now some of the not pleasant stuff, and I apologize if this is a little bit shocking, but it's something that we do, so we need to talk about it. Sharks and us. Okay, humans kill 100 million sharks a year. We, 8 billion almost, human beings around the planet, 80% of that 8 billion live within 100 miles of a coastline. So the vast majority of humans all around the planet live near coastlines. That's fact. We rely on the ocean for a lot of our food, especially in other countries, and we have a huge impact on sharks. We kill 100 million sharks a year. Many are killed for this thing called shark fin soup as well. About 40 million of those sharks are targeted. 40 million sharks a year are targeted just for their fins. This is where it gets gnarly. Their fins are taken off them on the boat, and then oftentimes they are thrown back in the water, still basically alive with no fins, and then they die. So, yeah, you can process that and make up your own decision about what you think about that. The soup is a delicacy and has been, and so, yeah. Obviously, there's a huge push to stop shark finning. Shark fin soup isn't a popular item in this country, but worldwide it is, and so a lot of pressure has been put on companies that do business in other places or maybe have boats out there to obviously not participate in this, and it's been outlawed in many countries, but it's still an illegal trade that's out there. And this is how many sharks kill per year, right? Around a dozen. Around 12 people a year get killed by sharks, and yet we think of them as the predators, and we kill 100 million of them. So really, like, who is the predator, right? Who is really the one that, things should be running away from? Definitely us. Why it's bad to kill sharks, I talked about this a second ago. Sharks are at the top of that energy pyramid, right? So there's just fewer of them, because there is less of the things below them, and on and on and on. And sharks, as a result of being few, right, things tend to live a long time because there's not as much direct competition, but they tend to have to be bigger and cover more area, and they tend to have fewer young, right? And they tend to come of reproductive age. If you live longer, you tend to, become reproductive a little bit later, so not so early on. So taking them out, just taking a few out, can have a big impact on the population. It can be very difficult for sharks to find mates. You could take an animal out before it's even had a chance to reproduce, so then that's never good, because then you're really negatively impacting that population as far as the numbers go. And many species, as a result of this, have declined 90% just in the past 30 years. 90% in 30 years. 70% decline in shark populations globally is common. And here's a poster that shows you the stats on the decline of shark populations. These are big ones, right? Tiger sharks have declined 97% globally. Great white sharks, 79%. Bull sharks, 99% decline. We have not seen major extinctions yet, but we are not far away if we keep operating the way we're operating. And so, as you guys get into marine biology, more and more, as you guys go to college, and this was not true, when I was in college, we are now having conversations about setting laws globally and policing globally our oceans. And I know that rubs people the wrong way, and it goes against that sort of, that national autonomy. But we have to do something. We have to manage our oceans globally, because these are global creatures. They do not pay attention to borders, and the ocean currents are global, and these animals move across states, across countries, across continents sometimes. So we have to come up with some sort of system or plan to manage these things if we want them to stay around. And hopefully we do. So my last slide says stop it. Here's some pretty gnarly images of what shark finning looks like, and the areas where the shark fins are dried and then sold. Here's someone up here taking photographs. These markets get busted every now and then, but it is a really hard thing to control. Like anything, if you prosecute the people that are selling these things, you're never really dealing with the root of the situation, which is the demand for it, right? You have to do away with that demand. You have to prosecute the people that are paying money for this, not just the poor people that are going out gathering these things. So, yeah. Okay, next week, we'll do the bony fish. Let's just recap this real quick, right? So we're talking about vertebrates. We talked about agnathans as the earliest form last week, and now we're talking about chondrichthyes, the cartilaginous fish. There are two groups of cartilaginous fish, the sharks and the rays, or orders, right? The sharks and the rays, and the rays and bats and things like that, and so Batoidae, and then we've got Salaci and a few facts about each of those groups. So know what makes a chondrichthyes. Know how you separate out the sharks and the rays, and also remember what that spiracle is for, because it's in both groups and how that operates. All right, guys, thanks for hanging out, and get your weekly questions done. Boop, and I'm done.